I went home from work that afternoon and I said to my husband that I had resigned from work and that I was no longer going to work in New South Wales. That if he wanted me to work again, we were going to go home to Queensland. And he said, that's all right, darling, you don't have to go to work anymore. And I was like, that's not the answer I wanted. But anyway, we left it at that for then. I always said that, well, ever my mother was alive, I would not go back to Queensland to live. And my mother had, yes, recently passed away a couple of years before this. And I also said that, well, ever Tissy, my beautiful lady friend that should have been my mother, while ever she was alive, I would stay in New South Wales. But she'd now passed away. I sat by her bed for 3 days with her until she took her last breath. I didn't want her to ever be alone when she passed. And I kept that promise to her. But now they were both gone, so I really wanted to go home to Queensland. One major thing that did disrupt our life in New South Wales, and which happened while I was working for the New South Wales government in that time frame somewhere, we had a huge fire in our house. There's a huge amount of different events that happened building up to this fire. I hadn't long celebrated my 40th birthday. Now, in our house we had the lounge room, and off the lounge room was a big games room with a bar and pool table and all those things. So that's where my 40th birthday was held, because my birthday's in July, which is in the middle of winter, and it's too bloody cold outside. So we had everybody inside. It was a bit crowded, but the men were out in the shed, some of them with a fajita. But anyway, the different things that happened building up to this. I had been given a hand painting by a very special lady for my 40th birthday, and she'd only just not long given it to me. It was in my car. The day before this fire, I had taken it down to my girlfriend's place at Blaney and showed it to her. I said, look at my birthday present, because I wanted her to see it. And then I'd left it in my car. So it was in my car when this fire hit. It was coming up to my daughter's 21st in a few months' time. So I was trying to get a photo collage to her. And I took this only 2-year-old photo that I had on the wall of her off and put it in the boot of my car so she didn't see it, because I was going to try and get a print taken off of it to give her for her birthday. So it wasn't in the house either. If it had been the next day that this fire had have happened in the house, my husband would have been in the house with sleeping pills coming off night shift, and he would never have survived it. The smoke would have taken him over before he would have woken. Now, on the morning of this fire, I was trying to leave for work early. My husband had cleaned out the fire, so taken all the coals out, but he never re-stoked the fire, and it was freezing cold, and I went to open the fire and I thought, oh no, he hasn't put any wood on it. No wonder it's so cold in here. So I actually thought the fire would go out, so I stoked the fire up, let it burn. Now, I was going to get my daughter, who lived in the granny flat separate from the house, and come over and stay in the house with her daughter and sleep in there. But because I was running so late, I thought, I may as well just take her to work and drop her off at daycare with me. So she was out of the house. Otherwise, on this day, they would have both been in the house and possibly not survived this fire. Because it was so cold in the house, I thought I would turn the gas heater on. Now, I didn't know my husband had turned it off at the bottle outside, because he'd caught our granddaughter playing with it, flicking it, trying to turn it on. The pilot light would come on all the time, but it wouldn't ignite. So I also didn't want to leave my daughter and granddaughter in the house with it being so cold, which was another reason why I took my granddaughter with me. But also in the lounge room, I'd done a whole heap of work washing, and all my really good clothes were hanging on an era not far from where the gas heater was. So because it didn't light, I just got the shits with it and thought, oh, bugger it, I'll just go to work, leave it. And I left the fire burning. I just turned it off halfway. And I walked out of the house, left my daughter asleep in the granny flat, took my granddaughter with me, and carried on the way a normal day normally would. I'd been at work for most of the day. It was now about lunchtime, and I get this horrific phone call from my daughter. Now, she'd woken up about 12 o'clock, went to go in the back door, and for some reason it was locked. I don't remember locking it on the day, but she went to open the back door and it was locked, and then she sort of looked up at the windows and all the glass was black, and this poor little bugger ran around the front of the house thinking that she'd lost her whole family inside because it was just all black. Then she noticed that both our cars were gone, and there was the windows in the lounge room were all black, and there was only a little tiny bit of smoke. So nobody knew our house was on fire. That went outside the front door. A little tiny bit of smoke mark. That was it that escaped this fire. But those few split seconds for my poor daughter thinking that she had lost her whole family inside this house, I just felt for her. But she rang and said, "Mum, there's a fire in the house." And my first thing was, don't walk in there, just walk away from the house. Do not open the door, which was quite quick thinking for me. I didn't panic at all. All I said was just don't open the door, walk away from it. I'll be home soon. I didn't go in and see my boss and tell him I was going home or what had happened. I said to the lady who worked behind me, I said, "I've had a fire in my house, I've got to go." And I just grabbed my bag and ran out of the office. I got home and my daughter was there and she was in tears, and I just walked up through the carport. I put my hand on the window, the glass was cold. I put my hand on the door and the door was cold, and she's saying to me, "Don't open the door, Mum, don't open the door." I said, "Whatever happened inside here has now finished. It's cold, there's nothing burning anymore." But she'd previously called the fire brigade, and the fire brigade guys came up, and I opened the door and it was just black everywhere. And the different things that this fire picked out to burn was just so unbelievable when you stop and have a look at it. Now, apparently the insurance assessor said that what had happened was there was a leak in the gas line, and because I probably hadn't turned it off properly, just got the shits and walked off, a big burst of gas had come through the line and it had taken out the clothes, in which then took out the lounge chairs. Now, between the two lounge chairs, the two single lounge chairs, there was an old-fashioned newspaper rack with newspapers in there. It completely disintegrated the lounges, jumped across. You could still pick up these newspapers and read them. It never burnt the newspapers. It was unbelievable. Now, we lived at the end of the electricity line. We had a big transformer right outside the back door, and it used to get hit by electricity all the time, so we would lose our power all the time. So I always had kerosene lanterns. Now, on the top of the TV, in which the TV was all melted and disintegrated, was this kerosene lantern. Now, all the glass that held the kerosene in was all melted and out of shape and everything, but the kerosene was still in there. It never ignited the kerosene. It went through from the lounge room. Now, in the games room, from my 40th birthday, there was still all paper streamers hanging around the wall. It burnt the bar, it burnt part of the coffee table. It went around the room behind these paper streamer things was like a metal Venetian blind. It had completely disintegrated the metal Venetian blinds, but the paper streamers were still hanging around the room. Not burnt, not singed, perfect. A little bit brown and dusty, but that was it. Unbelievable. Adjacent to the lounge room was the dining room, and the fire had gone up into the air conditioner. It was looking for oxygen, and it starved for oxygen. That's how it ended up putting itself out. But it then went kind of through the ceiling into the kitchen. Now above on one of the shelves, glass shelves in the kitchen, there was another kerosene lantern, and it did the same thing with that. It melted all the heavy glass and it was all out of shape, but never ignited the kerosene in it. Everything in the house was basically destroyed, not by the actual fire, but just by the smoke and the soot and everything. So we lost all electrical equipment, basically lost all our clothes. I had to throw everything out for my granddaughter. But when the insurance people sent out cleaners and said, oh, we'll clean it for you, and they were going to take particularly my granddaughter's cot, in which was a timber cot, and her toys in which once they've been through a fire, they are toxic. They were going to just give them a bit of a wash and take them to Dubbo and sell them to recuperate money. I said, you can't sell this cot to some poor family. Kids chew on their cots. Timber is porous. All this poison and toxicity from the lounge burning, which has a lot of toxicities in it, is in this cot. And same with her toys. So I really wasn't happy with this woman, and she's saying, oh, you're just stressed. I said, of course I'm stressed. I've just lost everything in my home. And I said, you're not taking these things off my property and selling them to some poor family that is possibly going to hurt their kids. They're staying with me. Get off my property. I will clean my own house. So I got the cot and all the things out. I took the cot up the back and I smashed it up, and then I put it on a fire and burnt it. I thought, there's nobody going to have this cot, and I'm not going to be responsible for, not that I would really directly be responsible, but I wasn't going to have anybody take these toys home or have their child play with them at all. On the day of the fire, I'd left work and I was only at home for about half an hour when my supervisor from work and one of the executives showed up to give me moral support and to see if there was anything I needed or needed help with. They told me I could take as much time off work as I needed, in which was lovely. I did have to take a little bit of time off work because obviously we had no clothes, no home, no nothing. And then my husband said to me, well, you've been putting off these renovations all this time. It's now time to start renovating. So yes, that forced me to then renovate. I'd been buying rental properties and doing other things instead of renovating our house, but it was now time to renovate the house.